I am an old man now. My hair is silver, and my hands tremble with age. Each day I sit by the window, gazing at the trees outside. The wind rustles the leaves gently, and it stirs memories of my past. They come like waves. Some bring a smile to my face, while others bring tears to my eyes. I had a wife once. Her name was Clara. She was gentle and beautiful, with a smile that could light up even the darkest days. We had 3 children, 2 sons, Thomas and Daniel, and a daughter, Emily. I worked tirelessly to provide for them, wanting them to have opportunities I never did. Clara took care of our home, cooked meals, and helped the children with their studies. Our house was always filled with laughter and warmth. As the years passed, the children grew up. They went to school, made friends, and slowly began to spend less time at home. I understood. They needed to find their own paths, but it still hurt. Clara would reassure me, "They'll come back. They love us." I believed her. Then, one day, Clara fell ill. She stayed in bed for weeks. I cared for her, cooked her meals, and sat by her side, telling her stories to bring her comfort. But she grew weaker. One evening, she looked at me and whispered, "Take care of the children. They need you." That night, she closed her eyes and never opened them again. My heart shattered. The house, once so full of life, became silent and empty. I hoped my children would stay with me, that they would feel the weight of the silence too. But they were busy with their own lives. Their visits became fewer and farther between. One day, they sat me down and said, "Dad, you can't live alone anymore. It's better for you to move to a care home." I wanted to refuse, but I saw no other choice. With a heavy heart, I agreed. Now I live at a place called Harmony Gardens. It's clean and quiet, with other elderly residents who, like me, spend their days lost in thought. Some of them talk to me, but most of the time I sit alone. The staff is kind, but they're busy. They bring me meals, give me my medication, and sometimes offer a warm smile. Every morning, I wake early and sit by the window, watching the sunrise. The sky fills with hues of orange and pink, and for a brief moment, I feel a sense of peace. But as the day unfolds, the emptiness returns. I think of my children. Where are they? Are they happy? Do they ever think of me? I remember the days when I carried them on my shoulders, took them to the park, and played games with them. I worked long hours to buy them clothes and toys. My hands were always tired, but my heart was full. They were my pride, my joy, my everything. But now they are far away. They call occasionally, but their voices are rushed. "How are you, Dad?" they ask. And before I can answer, they say, "We're busy. Take care." I understand. Life is demanding, and they have their own families now. But still, I wish they would visit more often. One day, a nurse handed me a notebook. "Write your memories," she said. "It might help." At first, I didn't know what to write. My hands shook as I held the pen. But slowly, the words began to flow. I wrote about Clara, her soft voice, her laughter, the way she made our house a home. I wrote about my children, their first steps, their first words, their bright smiles. The notebook became my companion. Every night I wrote before bed, as if I were sharing my pain and my love with someone who would listen. I hoped that one day my children might read it and understand how much I love them. But sometimes I wonder if they ever will. Maybe they're too busy. Maybe they've forgotten me, just as they've forgotten to visit. These thoughts weigh heavily on my heart, but I keep writing. It's the only thing I can do. The days here are monotonous. Breakfast at 8, lunch at 12, dinner at 6. Between meals, I sit by the window or in the small garden. The garden has roses, daisies, and tulips. Sometimes I watch the birds. They sing and fly freely, and I wonder if they feel joy or loneliness like me. One afternoon, a young boy named Noah visited. He was the grandson of one of the nurses. He smiled at me and said, "Hi, Grandpa." His smile reminded me of my youngest son, Daniel, when he was little. Noah sat beside me and asked, "Do you have any stories?" I nodded and began to tell him about my childhood, the village I grew up in, the green fields, the tall trees, and the clear river where we used to swim. I told him about my best friend, Samuel, and how we climbed trees and played hide and seek. As I spoke, Noah's eyes sparkled with excitement. For a moment, I felt alive again, sharing my memories with someone who truly listened. After he left, I felt a mix of emotions. I was happy to have shared my stories, but it also reminded me of my own family. Do my grandchildren even know me? Do they know how much I miss them? Do they know how much I want to hold them and tell them stories too? One evening, I asked the nurse if I could call my eldest son, Thomas. She handed me the phone, and with trembling hands, I dialed his number. He answered after a few rings. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice distant. I told him I missed him and wanted to see him. He said, "I'll try to visit soon," but his words felt hollow, like a promise he didn't intend to keep. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking of Clara. She would have known what to do. She always brought our family together, made our home warm and full of love. Without her, everything fell apart. I miss her more than words can express. I held the notebook close to my chest and whispered, "Clara, if you can hear me, please tell our children to come. Tell them I'm still here, waiting for them." Tears rolled down my cheeks as the pain in my heart grew unbearable, but I kept hoping. Maybe one day they would remember me. Days turned into weeks, and I waited by the window every afternoon, hoping to see one of my children's cars pull up. Each time I heard an engine, My heart leapt, but it was always someone else, a visitor for another resident or a delivery van. My hope dwindled with each passing day, but it never completely disappeared. One day, I decided to write letters to my children. I found an old notebook and a pen in the drawer by my bed. My hands trembled as I began to write. The first letter was for Thomas. I told him about my life here, the quiet days, and the memories that keep me company. I reminded him of the times I held his hand when he was little, teaching him to walk and ride a bike. The second letter was for Emily. I wrote about her smile, the way she used to sing while helping her mother in the kitchen. I told her how proud I was when she graduated from college. "You are my sunshine," I wrote, just as I used to call her when she was a child. The last letter was for Daniel. I reminded him of our fishing trips and how he laughed when he caught his first fish. I told him I missed his jokes and his laughter, which used to fill our home with joy. When I finished, I carefully folded each letter and placed them in envelopes. I asked the nurse to mail them for me. She smiled kindly and said, "Of course, Mr. Bennet. I'll send them right away." For the first time in weeks, I felt a small spark of hope. The next morning, I went to the garden. The air was fresh, and the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes, imagining my children reading the letters. I pictured their faces, perhaps touched by my words, deciding to come and visit me. But days passed, and there was no response, no calls, no letters, no visits. My heart ached, but I told myself to be patient. "They're busy," I thought. "Maybe the letters will remind them." I held on to this thought like a lifeline, trying to keep my hope alive. One evening, as I sat by the window, Noah came back. He brought me a small drawing he had made, a picture of me sitting under a tree with a big smile. "This is for you," he said, handing me the paper. My eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking. His kindness warmed my heart. It reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there is still light. And though my own children were far away, this little boy gave me a reason to smile, even if just for a while. One morning, as I sat by the window, the nurse walked in with a letter in her hand. "Mr. Bennet," she said with a smile, "you have mail." My heart raced as she handed me the envelope. The handwriting was familiar. It was from Thomas. My hands trembled as I opened it. He apologized for not visiting sooner. He wrote about his busy life, his demanding job, and how he often thought about me but never found the time. He promised to visit soon and bring his children, my grandchildren, whom I hadn't seen in years. My eyes filled with tears, both of relief and longing. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of happiness. A week passed, and then another. Each day, I looked out the window, hoping to see his car. The other residents noticed my excitement and asked me about it. "My son is coming," I told them with a proud smile. Their kind words encouraged me, but as the days turned into weeks, doubt began to creep in. One afternoon, I decided to write again. This time, I wrote to Emily. I told her about Thomas's letter and how much it had lifted my spirits. I reminded her of the times we used to sit together and talk about her dreams. "I miss our conversations," I wrote, hoping my words would reach her heart. I gave the letter to the nurse to send, and once again, I waited. The days were still lonely, but the small moments of kindness from Noah and the promise of a visit from Thomas gave me a reason to hold on. I thought of Clara and how she would have encouraged me to stay strong. "They'll come," I whispered to myself each night before bed. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I thought about my life, my family, and the love I had given them. Maybe they'll understand one day, I thought. And with that, I closed my eyes, holding on to the hope that tomorrow might bring something new. One bright morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. It wasn't the usual sound of the nurses or the staff. My heart began to race. I sat up in bed, listening carefully. Could it be him? Could it be Thomas? The door opened slowly, and there he was, my eldest son, standing tall but looking hesitant. Behind him were two little children, holding his hands. My eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I couldn't speak. "Dad," he said softly, "I'm here." I opened my arms, and he leaned down to hug me. It was the first time in years that I had felt his embrace. His children, my grandchildren, smiled shyly at me. "These are Lily and Jack," he said, introducing them. "They've been excited to meet you." I looked at the children and smiled. "Hello, Lily." "Hello, Jack," I said. They giggled and handed me drawings they had made. One of a house with a garden and the other of an old man smiling. "This is you, Grandpa," Jack said proudly. The room suddenly felt alive with their presence. Thomas sat beside me, and we talked for hours. He told me about his work, his family, and how much he missed the old days. I listened, cherishing every word. I told him about the home, the kind nurses, and Noah, the little boy who often visited me. Before they left, Thomas promised to come again soon. "This time, I mean it, Dad," he said firmly. His words filled me with hope. A few days later, Emily came to see me. She had received my letter and decided to visit. She hugged me tightly, and we spent hours talking about her life, her struggles, and her dreams. She apologized for staying away for so long and promised to visit more often. For the first time in years, I felt surrounded by love. My children were finally beginning to understand. They saw me not as a burden, but as a father who had given them everything he could. Their visits became more frequent, and the emptiness in my heart began to fade. Noah continued to visit me, bringing his cheerful stories and drawings. One day he said, "You look happier now, Mr. Bennet." I smiled and nodded. "Yes, I am," I replied. As the days turned into months, I realized that life was not about how much you give, but about the moments you share with those you love. My heart, once heavy with loneliness, was now filled with gratitude. I still missed Clara deeply, but I knew she would be proud. Her love had taught me to keep going, even in the hardest times. And now, as I sat in the garden with my children and grandchildren by my side, I felt at peace.